Good afternoon. This is John Ondrick from Mortgage Scholars. I'm owner and president, and we've been around for about 9 years. I like doing things that are a little bit interesting and a little bit different. And this is only going to last for a couple minutes, but this is one of the most interesting things that we're going to talk about. And this is one of the most unusual people in the country. This is my good friend and next door neighbor, Otis Lloyd. Otis lives on Mill Street in Cambridge, Maryland. How old are you? You're what, 84, 85?
85 years
105? 85 years old. Okay. I'm going to tell you what's so interesting about Otis in a minute. Otis, if you take a look at the hat Otis is wearing, just for fun, this hat, which I've owned for many, many years, and this may give you a bit of a hint on where we're going. This hat was owned by a man named Samuel Wright. Sam Wright. S.C. Wright. This is his actual hat. He did not wear it during the Civil War. This was called the slouch hat. And you'll see on top of here it says GAR for the Grand Army of the Republic. And then there's a side infantry unit here. And what made him so interesting is the fact that he was among quite a few people that won the Congressional Medal of Honor. And what is interesting about him is the fact that all of you have heard about Antietam, which was took place in Maryland. It was called Shiloh. Am I right? Yeah. But the thing about it is, it was more people were killed in 1 hour when this battle started than any other battle that America has been in. It was absolutely horrific, and nothing was more horrific than what is called Bloody Lane. And you hear it Bloody Ridge too. And I'm sure you remember from years ago. And Bloody Lane was when Northern troops were ordered over a ridge up to take a fence line that obscured the fighting that was going on. And one unit had gone up in front and they were off to the left. And then they sent these troops up, and the first group of troops got slaughtered so bad that in the accounts that are here, the bodies were actually embedded into the fence. The people weren't left; they were just they became part of the fence, and that's how bad it was, and why they called it Bloody Lane. What is interesting here is that Sam Wright was a sergeant. And I'll just read a part of this. This is the authoritative guide on Medal of Honor winners during the Civil War. It says, some 200 yards in advance of our position, which we were holding at a terrible cost, was a fence built high and strong. The troops in advance had tried to scale the fence and reform under the hell of fire. They were actually torn in shreds and wedged into the fence. But let me go back and start to talk to Otis now. Tell me a little bit about your dad. Don't give it away as far as too early in his life. Let's not use a date. But tell me about your dad from, let's say, a teenager growing up until he had you.
Well, my father...
and what was his name?
Huh?
What was your dad's name?
It was the same as mine, Otis Sterling Lloyd. Now, he was known locally as Captain Lloyd.
Let me ask you something. Everyone's probably listening to this and saying, okay, you know, where the hell is this surprise we're talking about? If I were to tell you that his grandfather was born before the Civil War, there's a lot of you out there would go, hey, that's pretty cool.
That's
You
right.
know, but that's not true. This is the rare. When he told me this out of the blue a year or two ago, it totally blew me away. I want him to tell the camera here. This is your camera. This is your camera here. Please tell me when your father was born.
My father, and most people think I'm fibbing them, was born before the Civil War. He was born January the 6th, 1861. And the war started in April.
April, Fort Sumter.
And
who was president then?
And I believe, if I'm correct, that he was born in Buchanan's administration.
Isn't that amazing?
Lincoln had been elected, but he hadn't taken oath yet. He wasn't in office.
Right, exactly.
And he was born in a community. It wasn't a town. It was just a settlement, more or less, called Athol, Athol. Locally, it was known. The area was known as Hungry Neck. And my father said when he was a young child, his first job on Saturday was molding all the candles that they would use during the week. Now, my father, I have asked him a lot of questions about living in the country. I asked him, for instance, if you got sick, what did you do? He said, well, you hitched the horse and you went for the doctor. You know, the doctor might be 10 miles away. So that meant that if it was at night, you had to go in the dark to the doctor and fetch him and bring him home.
Probably on horse and saddle.
Well, they usually went with horse and buggy.
Buggy.
Now, I asked my father one time about time. Well, how did you tell time? I do know, he said, that they had a clock at home, a mantel clock. He said it had wooden wheels and pinions and gears. And my grandfather would crush walnuts to get the oil to oil the clock. I said, well, how did you set the time? He said, by the sun. Well, that's not very accurate. I can think of ways to do that. I should have asked him exactly how they did that.
You probably had a sundial, a rudimentary sundial. I mean, you can take a stake and mark it out. So
you can put a stake down and measure the shadow and set the clock when the shadow's the longest. But you can be off a half an hour that way. But what does a farmer need exact time for anyway? He had to get up probably before sunup, and he'd go to bed at sundown.
You're right. They didn't have night lights. That's one of the things people don't seem to understand.
Yeah.
In the old days, in your dad's time, that there was no electricity, there was no kerosene. Oil for people who were farmers was very expensive, especially the whale oil from the sperm oil. That was very, very expensive, and very few people could afford it. So you had candles, but candles also had a certain cost to them too. And so most people, they just went to bed. When it got dark, you just went to bed, and you were lucky. Maybe you had one candle, and you may sit up and talk. Well, we're running out of time. I can tell by the camera starting to blink. Let me just ask you one or two short questions before we wrap up. It would be nice to know when your grandfather was born, because with your dad being born in 1861, I mean, there's every possibility that your grandfather could have been actually born in the 18th century.
It goes pretty close to it. I think the great-grandfather, I have the
genealogy
family tree somewhere. I have to check that out. Now, people ask me, how old was my father when I was born?
Yeah, well, of course, that begs the question. you know.
Well, he was nearly 62. He had a family before he married my mother. She was his second wife.
So everything worked out fine. Hey, Cary Grant had a daughter when he was in his 70s or something, you know.
Now, by his first wife, he had 2 children. They were very young when they died. And there was Leon and Leela. They died in the 1890s. My half-brother and half-sister died over 100 years ago.
And that's amazing. Well, that's about it. I wanted to thank Otis for taking the time to talk to us on camera. This is probably the first time you've been captured on camera talking about this. And I just thought this would be interesting for everybody to see. It truly is something I think is rather unique in this country. There's a couple others that you probably put them on one hand. Anyway, thank you all very much, and we'll talk to you later. Happy learning. Bye.